Hello everyone. In today's class, we will be learning about conservative force and the relation between potential energy. Already we have learnt about what are central forces, how a central force can be said as conservative force, and how any central force which is conservative in nature can be expressed in terms of potential energy. And also we'll be seeing what are the basic terminology that we'll be using in learning about Kepler's laws of planetary motion. Let's start our class. Myself S. Vidyarani, working as Assistant Professor of Physics at MVS Government Degree College, Autonomous, Mehboob. Let's start the session. First, let us see how the force, that is central force, can be expressed as gradient of potential energy. So in order to find out this, first let us define what is potential energy. So potential energy is the energy that is derived from the work. So this can be written as minus du of in terms of x, y and z is equal to work done, that is dw, which can be written as work done can be written as force into displacement or force into position vector. So hence force into dr. Dr is the position vectors in terms of x, y and z direction. So hence we know that position vector is equal to r is equal to xi plus yj plus zk. Hence when we differentiate position vector, so we will get dxi plus dyj plus dzk. So as there is a scalar product, this is a scalar product, so hence I dot I becomes 1. So when I do the dot product of two vectors, then I'll get it as fx dx plus fy dy plus fz dz, because all the dot products between the same unit vector will be 1, that is I dot I is 1. So hence I got fx dx is equal to fx dx and fy dy and fz dz. That means when we compare both the values on two sides, so that means fx can be equal to, when we differentiate this with partial differentiation with respect to s, we get it as minus dou u x by dou x minus dou u by dou x. Hence the fx term will be equal to this xth term, that is minus dou u by dou x, and fy is equal to minus dou u by dou y, and also fz is equal to minus dou u by dou z. So something has gone wrong here. So fz is equal to minus dou u by dou z. So this will be our equation. So therefore when we see here f is equal to minus x into dou u by dou x minus y into dou u by dou y. So I am replacing here in terms of f. So and minus z dou u by dou z. So these are the equations that we got. So that means which is equal to, if we take minus common in this equation, so we'll be getting I'll show you. So when we take minus common in this, so we will get minus common we have taken, so dou u by dou x plus dou u by dou y plus dou u by dou z. So this is nothing but minus where I have taken common. So here dou u by dou x plus dou u by dou y plus dou u by dou z. That means we can take out u common in all the three terms. So we will get dou by dou x plus dou by dou y plus dou by dou z of u. We know that dou by dou x plus dou by dou y plus dou by dou z is nothing but gradient. So minus of grad of u gives our force. So grad, mathematically it is expressed as inverted nabla, or say inverted triangle, that is minus del u minus grad u. So force is equal to minus of gradient of potential energy. This is our potential energy, and we have got minus here, so minus of gradient of potential energy. So force can be expressed as gradient of potential energy. Next, moving on, that means definition of the operator nabla or gradient is equal to unit vector x into dou by dou x plus unit vector y into dou by dou y plus unit vector z into dou by dou z. So this is the operator nabla or say gradient. So nabla of f of xyz is nothing but grad of f of xyz. Nabla times a scalar function is nothing but, this is a scalar function, so nabla times of this scalar function is nothing but gradient of the same function, which is a vector. Now let us see, find force if potential energy is alpha by r. Here potential energy is given as alpha by r. We have to find out the force. So as we all know, r is nothing but position vector. So mod r, that means magnitude of r, is equal to square root of x square plus y square plus z square. And we know that du by dx, that is equal to, du by dx is equal to alpha into dou of 1 by r by dou x. So we here our potential energy is alpha by r. Alpha is a scalar, so alpha I have taken out. So I have to differentiate with respect to r. So dou of 1 by r by dou x. So this gives rise to minus of alpha, because 1 by r means we will get it as, with respect to x we have to differentiate partially. So we will get it as minus dou by dou, that means here in place of 1 by r we have to take 1 by root over x square plus y square plus z square. So when we substitute this, we will get it as x cube. So minus of alpha into x by r cube, we will get it as du by dou x. Next, f is equal to, if you want to find out the x, the formula is minus unit vector of x into dou u by dou x minus y unit vector of y into dou u by dou y minus z unit vector dou u by dou z. Hence, so f is equal to, we have to multiply this equation. So alpha into unit vector of x is x cap into x by, so r cube I have taken common. Next, minus y cap with respect to dou u by dou y gives me y, so hence for z we will get it as z. So z xx cap by r cube plus y cap by r cube, zz cap by r cube. So r cube I have taken common. So this implies force is equal to alpha xx bar plus, sorry, xx cap plus y cap plus zz cap is nothing but r unit vector, sorry, position vector r. So r I have taken it as this way by r cube, which implies this can be written as alpha. If in terms of unit vector we have to write, then this becomes r square in the denominator. So r cap by r square. That means force can be expressed in terms of alpha into unit vector r by magnitude of r square. So now find sign of the coefficient alpha in the following situations, that is Newton's force of gravity, Coulomb force between two positive charges, Coulomb force between two negative charges, Coulomb force between a positive charge and a negative charge. So first, some properties of nabla we will see. Del is equal to, gradient is equal to x cap dou by dou x plus y cap dou by dou y plus z cap dou by dou z. Grad f is equal to unit vector x cap by dou f by dou x plus y cap by dou f by dou y plus z cap by dou f by dou z, which is nothing but grad f. Nabla times a scalar function is a gradient of the function. We have already seen this. And del dot f, if we want to know, it becomes divergence. So divergence is nothing but dou fx by dou x plus dou fy by dou y plus dou f by z by dou z is equal to divergence f, which is a scalar product or dot product. Dot product of two gradient with a function gives rise to divergence. Then gradient, when we use this nabla with a function f using cross product, then we will get it a curl function. It will be a curl function, that is x cap, y cap, z cap unit vectors, dou by dou x, dou by dou y, dou by dou z, and the function f has has uh, values of fx, fy, as fz. So when we take the curl of these equation, we will get it as curl f. That means we have to take the determinant of these terms. So we get curl f, or rotation of f, or we can say rotor of the function. So nabla and cross product of a vector function is curl or rotor of the function. That means gradient is also a vector function, curl is also a vector function, whereas divergence is a scalar function. As we have already learnt about Stokes theorem, I am just reminding you, line integral of del cross f dot ds is equal to surface integral of f dot dr. So sorry, line integral of f dot dr. So this is surface integral and this is line integral. So according to Stokes theorem, surface integral can be converted into line integral, or line integral of any vector can be converted into surface integral using cross product. So the surface integral of the curl of a vector field over a surface S is equal to the line integral of the vector field over its boundary. So another definition of conservative force is that line integral of f of r dr is equal to 0. That means this value del cross f should be equal to 0. According to Stokes theorem, del cross f should be equal to f dot dr. But in case of conservative forces, this f is a function of position vector r cap. That means this value should be equal to 0. So this value should be equal to 0 means, that means del cross f should be equal to 0. That means curl of the conservative force should be equal to 0. Let us see whether Coulomb's force is conservative in nature or not. So is Coulomb's force conservative? We know that F is equal to alpha r cap by r square, that can be written as alpha r by r cube, wherein r is equal to x square plus y square plus z square. So we have to find out the cross product of del and f. So grad and f. So del dou fx by dou y is equal to dou by dou y of alpha x by r cube. That we will get it as minus 3 alpha x by r power 4. In the same way, if we sort out all these values, dou r by dou y is equal to minus 3 alpha xy 1 by r power 5. This is equal to dou fy by dou x. This implies del cross f of z is equal to dou fy by dou y minus dou fy by dou x, which is equal to 0. So all the values will be equal to 0. Hence del cross f is equal to 0, because force conservative and work is path independent. So this force is conservative nature, hence curl of f has come to 0, because there is no yth term in this equation to partially differentiate. So this value becomes 0. In the same way, if you observe here, all the values wherever we are differentiating partially, so those values we don't have, so we will get it as 0. Next we have to find out the potential energy for Coulomb's force. As we all know, potential energy delta U is equal to minus W. That is equal to minus of r naught to r initial distance r naught to final distance r position vector r f of r dr, where which is equal to minus r naught to r f of r dr is equal to minus of r naught to r. Here our function, our force is given as alpha by r square, hence alpha by r square into dr. So this is our force. So del u is equal to potential energy in the limits upper limit minus lower limit, u of r minus u of r 0, that is equal to alpha by r minus alpha by r naught. So if u of r naught tends to infinity, so this r naught tends to infinity, then if r naught tends to infinity, that means u of r naught becomes 0. Then u of r is equal to alpha by r. When this is infinity, this value becomes 0. R naught is infinity, which is inversely proportional to u of r naught. That means u of r naught will become 0. When u of r naught will become 0, then our ur is equal to alpha by r. Now we will see time dependent potential energy. So line integral of f of rt dr is equal to 0. That means del cross f of r comma t is equal to 0. That means if a force satisfies these conditions, then potential energy can be defined. So from this we can infer u of rt minus u of r naught t is equal to within the integral within the limits r naught to r minus f of rt dr. We know that differentiation of potential energy in terms of r and t will give rise to dou u by dou x into dx plus dou u by dou y into dy plus dou u by dou z into dz plus dou u by dou t into dt. So this can be further simplified in terms of grad u dot dr plus dou u by dou t into dt. This implies du can be written as minus dt plus dou u by dou t into dt, whereas minus dou u dot dr is equal to, we know that minus f dot dr. Minus f dot dr, because potential energy is also written in terms of minus of force. So minus f dot dr is equal to minus work, that is dw, which in turn is equal to minus dt. So hence in place of dou u dot delta u dot dr we have substituted minus dt. So when we further take minus dt to the LHS side, so it becomes positive. So du plus dt is equal to dou u by dou t into dt. That means if potential energy depends on time, then mechanical energy is not conserved. It gets transformed into some other forms of energy or to external systems. So that means when potential energy is depending on time, our mechanical energy is not conserved, but it gets transformed in other forms of energy. So now let us move on to Kepler's the laws of planetary motion. Basic terms we will learn today in this class. So as we all know, there are three laws of planetary motion which are discovered by Kepler, that is Kepler's first law, Kepler's second law, as well as Kepler's third law. So while we learn about these laws in detail in next classes, first we will have to know what are the basic terms that are required to know before learning about the laws of planetary motion. So I will just for today's class I will just say basic terms only. Later I will be discussing about Kepler's laws in detail. So this man is Johannes Kepler. He was born on December 27, 1571 in Germany. He studied about the planetary motion of Mars, and he used observational data which is already given by Bray. So this is the man before Kepler who has given him the notes, that is Tycho Brahe. He is a Danish astronomer who hired Kepler as his assistant. So Kepler joined as assistant with Tycho Brahe. So this man came up with accurate observation of Mars with his naked eyes, assigned Kepler to develop a theory of planetary motion using his observations. So he has come up with some accurate observation relating to Mars planet, and he assigned Kepler to develop based on those notes a theory of planetary motion using those observations. So Tycho Brahe used only compass. So he did not use any telescope, he just saw with naked eye. First let us move on to what is Kepler's first law. According to Kepler's first law, the statement is in this way: the orbit of each planet is an ellipse and the sun is at one of its focus. The orbit of each planet is an ellipse and the sun is at one focus. So before Kepler, Copernicus has said that planets are revolving around the sun in a circular orbits where sun is there at their center. But whereas Kepler proved Copernicus wrong because according to him planets are not moving in circles, instead they are moving in elliptical orbits, keeping the sun as one of their foci. So he proved Copernicus wrong. First let us know what is ellipse. So ellipse is nothing but elongated and flattened circle. I will show you. So this is a circle, we all know. So if we elongate it by its sides, then it will be in the shape of this. So this elongated and flattened circle. So the circle has equal radius on all sides, but whereas this ellipse is an elongated and flattened circle. So characterized by eccentricity and length of major axis. This will have major axis as well as minor axis. Major axis is nothing but the longest path. If you might have seen here, see the longest path from one end of the ellipse to the other end is the major axis, and the passing through the center, and the smallest axis which is moving through the center is called minor axis. The least one is called minor axis. So one is the major axis and this is the minor axis. So eccentricity is nothing but degree of freedom. So major axis is nothing but longer axis, whereas minor axis is shorter axis. So this is Kepler's first law. Now we will learn what is focus. Focus is nothing but one of the two special points on the major axis of an ellipse. So if you might have seen the above picture, so in this is the major axis. So focus is located on the major axis. So focus can be said as a point, one of the two special points on the major axis of an ellipse. So an ellipse has two focus points on the major axis. So one of the 2 points is called as focus point. So one of the two special points on the major axis of an ellipse is called as focus. If you observe here, this is an ellipse. So this is the major axis, if you might have observed. So there are two focus, that is A and B here. So this is a focus and this is also a focus. So these are the two special points on the major axis of an ellipse, and these are called as foci. Foci is nothing but plural of focus. So if you draw a line joining A and B, A plus B always the same on any point on the ellipse. A plus B value will always be same on any point of the ellipse. That is, A plus B is equal to constant. If you draw any on any side, let us say if you draw this line, I will show you. If I draw a line here A and a line here to B, sorry, I may not be drawing correctly. So if I draw like this, so the value of A and this B will be the same as that of this A plus B. That means the value of A plus B is always same on any point of the ellipse. Now we will move on to eccentricity. Eccentricity is the degree of flatness. So to find out the eccentricity, for a circle eccentricity E is equal to 0. That means you might have observed, again I will show you. Okay, so I will draw a pic. So I am showing you the eccentricity. So this is a circle. we know that eccentricity is the degree of flatness. There is no flatness in a circle. That means E is equal to 0. Eccentricity or flatness is equal to 0 for a circle. But if you see, our earth has an eccentricity of 0.017. Our earth has an eccentricity of 0.017. That means a little bit of elliptical way our earth is. It's not exactly circle. Only when E is equal to 0, then it will be a circle. But our earth is little bit slightly near to circle, near to ellipse. That means it is not much flatter or much round. So it is in the shape of this. So earth has an eccentricity of 0.017. But how to calculate the eccentricity of any object or of any planet? That is, E is equal to C by A. So eccentricity can be calculated by the ratio of C and A. So what is C? C is equal to center to focus. Center, the distance between the center and the focus is called as C. Okay. And what is A? A is nothing but half of major axis, or we can say semi-major axis. Suppose the length of this major axis is, let us say, 10 meters. Then half of major axis, that is nothing but 5. That means half of major axis, that is semi-major axis. So A is nothing but semi-major axis, and C is equal to the distance between the center to the focus point. So this is how. So when we calculate this value C by A, so for a circle, if you might have observed, this C and A will be same. C by A is 0. That means there won't be any foci. That means there won't be any foci for a circle. So this C will be 0 for a circle. So hence we will get it as 0. Next. Now two more new terms we have to learn. So aphelion and perihelion. What is aphelion and what is perihelion? Aphelion is the point on the orbit farthest from the sun. As I have told you that in the above figure, let us say these are the foci. These are the two focal points or foci. Let us say sun is at one of the foci. Let us say sun is at this point. Let us say sun is at this point. Okay. So that what is aphelion? So the farthest distance from the sun. That means this point is called aphelion. That is, farthest point from the sun is called aphelion, and the shortest distance from the sun is called, or from the foci, is called as perihelion. So here we are keeping sun as foci. So helion means sun. So aphelion means farther to the sun, whereas perihelion means nearer to the sun. So that means see, aphelion is the okay. Aphelion is the point on the orbit farthest from the sun. So where is aphelion? So here, let us say there is the sun here. Here let us say earth is revolving around the sun. So aphelion is the point on the orbit farthest from the sun. So here this is the orbit, that is earth is going to revolve around the sun. So this is the farthest point from the sun, so which is called as aphelion. And perihelion is the point on the orbit closest to the sun or nearer to the sun. So this point is very much near to the sun. So this point is called as perihelion. So helion means sun, peri means near, aphi means ap means far. So perihelion means nearer to the sun, aphelion means farther from the sun. Next, Kepler's second law. So according to Kepler's second law, the line joining the planet to the sun, sweeps out equal areas in equal intervals of time. Let us say first the planet is at point T1 at time T1. After some time T2 it has reached a point this. So if we draw, the planet is moving. If we draw from this arc, that is from T1 to T2, the planet has moved, let us say in 5 seconds. So this area, this arc covered by the planet is equal to, if we take same 5 minutes, somewhere at other point other than this, so again at same, let us say the planet is here at point T3 and it has reached to T4. So in the same 5 seconds, and the area traveled by this, or the arc is A2, let us say this A1 is equal to A2. So the area swept by the planet when the distance between the planet and the sun between the equal intervals of time is the area covered is same. Kepler's second law says that law of equal areas. First law is called as law of elliptical orbits. Kepler's second law is also called as law of equal areas. So because equal areas are swept by the body which is revolving around the sun. So the line joining the planet to the sun sweeps out equal areas in equal intervals of time. That in other words, the area from one time to another time is equal to another area with the same interval of time. So this area covered by the planet within the same interval is equal to the area covered by the same planet within the same interval. The areas are also same. All of the areas in yellows and peach have equal intervals of time. Next, acceleration of planets. So how acceleration is affected when the planets are nearer to the sun or when the planets are farther away from the sun. Planet moves faster when closer to the sun. So let us say here the sun is the yellow one. So the planet is revolving around the sun. So when planet is closer to the sun, so it moves faster so that it should cover larger area. So force acting on the planet increases as distance decreases, because the distance has decreased between the planet and the sun, because of which force acting on the planet will be increased, and hence when force is increased, that means force is directly proportional to acceleration. Hence when force is increased, acceleration increases, so that the planet moves very swiftly or very speedily, because we know that F is equal to A, because we know that F is equal to A, hence F is directly proportional to A. Hence, when force increases, that means acceleration also increases. Next, when planet moves slower when farther from the sun, because when it is farther from the sun, so distance is increased. When distance increases, force acting on the planet decreases. When force acting on the planet decreases, what happens? Force is directly proportional to acceleration again. So when force is decreased, hence acceleration also decreases. Now we will move on to Kepler's third law. Kepler's third law is called as law of periods. The square of the period of any planet is proportional to the cube of the semi-major of its axis. The square of the period of any time period means time period. The square of the period, that is t square, of any planet is proportional to, that is t square is directly proportional to, semi-major is a, semi-major axis is a, so cube of the semi-major axis is a cube, hence t square is directly proportional to a cube. So t square is directly proportional to a cube. Why? Because square of the time period, that is, let the time period of any planet be t, so t square is directly proportional to the cube root of the semi-major axis. I have told you this is the semi-major, this is the major axis, and semi-major axis is the half of the major axis, that is this distance is a, so t square is directly proportional to a cube. Also this law is also referred as harmonic law. T square is directly proportional to a cube and also called as harmonic law. See, t square is directly proportional to a cube. T is equal to orbital period in years. A is equal to semi-major axis in astronomical units. So we can calculate how long it takes, or how much time it takes for planets to orbit if semi-major axis is known. If we know the semi-major axis, we can come to know how much time a planet can take to orbit around the sun. So now we'll come to know about astronomical unit. I have just now told that semi-major axis is calculated in astronomical units. So astronomical unit is termed as AU. AU is the mean distance between the earth and the sun. So the distance between the earth, mean distance between earth and the sun is called as astronomical unit. One astronomical unit is nearly equal to 1.5 into 10 power 8 kilometers, that is 9.3 into 10 power 7 miles if it converted. So it is equal to 9.3 into 10 power 7 miles. So let us see visually, let us see. Here there is a sun, here there is earth. So the mean distance between the earth and the sun is this is the astronomical units I have shown here. So one astronomical unit is from sun to earth, so that is equal to 9.3 into 10 power 7 miles. Now let us see few examples relating to third law. So calculating the orbital period of one astronomical unit, that is t square is equal to a cube. So our semi-major axis is given as 1. So t square is equal to 1 cube, that is equal to 1. That means time period is equal to 1 year. So calculating the orbital period of 4 AU, that means our semi-major axis is given as 4. So t square is equal to 4 cube, which is equal to 64. That means t is equal to on the root of 64, which gives that 8 years. So the time taken by a planet which has 4 astronomical units, the time period, orbital period will be of 8 years. We will see that some statistics relating to orbital data of different planets. The orbital data of various planets are in this way. Mercury, if you see, the eccentricity of Mercury is 0.206. Semi-major axis is cube of semi-major axis is 0.06. Hence t square is equal to 0.06. And in terms of astronomical unit, if you see A as 0.39 and T will be our 0.24. So next, Venus, if you observe, eccentricity is 0.007. So this is 0.62. These are the details. If you see the Earth, eccentricity is 0.017. Time taken is 1 year. Astronomical unit is 1 unit. So this is the basic statistics that we will consider for Earth as 1. So t square is equal to 1, a cube is also 1. So the time taken by the Earth to revolve around the sun is 1 year, whereas Venus takes 0.62. years of to revolve around the sun, because it is very much near to the sun. And if you observe this Mercury is still showing is very still near than Earth and Venus, hence it takes much lesser time than the Venus and the Earth. So it takes only 0.2 year. 0.2 year means nearly 2 months. In 2 months Mercury can do one revolution around the sun. If you see the Mars, Mars is 1.88 times. 1.88 years means it's near about 2 years. So Mars take nearly 2 years to revolve around the sun. If you see Jupiter, Jupiter is still farther than Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars. So it takes nearly 11.9 years, that is near about 12 years it takes to revolve around the sun. Saturn still more time, that is nearly 30 years. It takes 30 years to revolve one revolution around the sun. And if you see the eccentricities of these values, so Mercury has more eccentricity than Venus, Earth, Mars and Jupiter. So Venus has a very less eccentricity when compared to all other planets. So Earth has an eccentricity of 0.017. Now we will come to know about comets. Although Kepler's laws were intended to describe the motion of planets around the sun, these laws, Kepler's laws, can also be applied to comets. So even though Kepler has observed the planetary motion, but these Kepler's laws are also can be applied for comets also. Comets are good examples because they have very low mass and very low orbits. Orbit of each planet is an ellipse and sun is at one of its foci. We are recollecting all the three laws. The first law states that orbit of each planet is an ellipse and sun is at one of its foci. Second law is equal areas in equal intervals of time, that we have seen. And the third law is t square is equal to a cube. That means time period, square of the time period is equal to cube of the semi-major axis. So major contributions given by Kepler's laws are: Kepler's second law, that is equal area, helped Newton come up with his law of universal gravitation, that is F is equal to gmm by r square, where m is the mass of the earth, capital M, small m is the mass of the other planet or satellite, g is the gravitation constant, force is F is equal to force of attraction, and r is the distance between those two masses of the bodies or planets. So motions of satellite and spacecraft in orbit near planets. So these contributions helped to find out the law of universal gravitation. So I think you have learnt about the planetary motion and the basic terms that we use in planetary motion. So thank you for your patience listening. Signing off for today's session.